A Second Chance at Love. Previous episodes are available in playlist. A link is given in the video description. Episode 46. No Wonder Children Love You. That night, Roxanne received a text from Jack before she went to bed. It contained the details to the medical consultation. It was in 2 days, and the location was an orphanage in the city. After making a mental note of the information, Roxanne typed a simple answer and went to bed early. However, her mind was so occupied with Colby's words that she could not fall asleep. It was only after an indeterminate time that she finally drifted off to sleep. In the next 2 days, the boys kept trying to get Roxanne's attention. To be more specific, they were doing it on Lucian's behalf. Meanwhile, Roxanne was clueless as to why Archie and Benny were so persistent in mentioning Lucian to her, nor did she know how to deal with them. After pondering about it for some time, she decided to pour all her attention into preparing the medical consultation. When the boys saw she was at work, they finally gave up. 2 days later, Jack's car appeared in front of Roxanne's house early in the morning. Roxanne was about to step out of the house to get a cab when she saw his car at the entrance. A look of surprise flashed past her eyes. "I figured your car wouldn't be ready so soon, so I decided to swing by to pick you up." Jack flashed her a smile. Hearing that, Roxanne had no choice but to suppress the peculiar feelings she felt and got into the car. She had many things with her. After what happened last time, she learned her lesson and prepared many gifts for the orphans. Jack was stunned by the bags she had with her. "You're really thoughtful. No wonder the children at the previous orphanage loved you," he remarked. A gentle expression crept upon Roxanne's face. "Maybe it's because I've interacted with many children in my life." That was why she could not bear to see the children at orphanages suffer. She hoped she could help bring changes to their lives to the best of her ability. Instead of assessing her, Jack only said, "I'm sure the children will be very grateful to you this time as well." Roxanne pursed her lips to form a smile. With that, they were on their way. In the meantime, Archie and Benny only poked their heads out of the door to watch their mother leave with Jack. Although Roxanne had informed them that she was going to treat some children, they could not help but feel a sense of danger. Their parents had not talked to each other for the past 2 days. Jack, on the other hand, had come looking for Roxanne quite often. The boys could not stop worrying even though Roxanne had already sworn that she and Jack were just colleagues. Still, there was nothing they could do if Roxanne wanted to avoid Lucian. As they exchanged glances with each other, a crestfallen look fell upon their faces. The orphanage was an hour away from Roxanne's house. By the time they arrived, the Damaris family had already set up the interior for diagnosis and treatments. Unlike the last time when Roxanne had to line up to enter, Roxanne and Jack were immediately ushered into the director's office as soon as they got out of the car. "Mr. Damaris." "Dr. Jarvis," greeted the director eagerly. Roxanne was a little surprised that the doctor knew her, but when she glanced at Jack, she immediately came to her senses. He must have talked to the director before. After politely exchanging some words with the director, they immediately got to work. The flow of events was quite similar to the previous one. Once Roxanne and Jack entered the tents, the children began lining up and entering one by one. However, Jack and Roxanne were the only ones in the tent this time. Perhaps it was because Jack was going to pass on some of the Damaris family's medical knowledge to Roxanne. Switch to this acupuncture point. At first, Roxanne thought the two of them would not be able to cope with all the work. Somehow, the children were very cooperative. Hence, she could not tell if it was because of the gifts she had prepared. Both Roxanne and Jack treated the patients in an orderly fashion. Perhaps it was because the orphanage was in a city and had better facilities compared to the previous one. Apart from some congenital disabilities, the children were mostly fine. As the number of children still waiting in line gradually reduced, Roxanne, too, gradually felt more relaxed. When the last child in line entered the tent, Roxanne took out a stuffed bunny and gave it to him. Surprised, the boy looked up and thanked her politely, "Thank you, Ms. Jarvis." He then carefully took the stuffed bunny from her. Roxanne could not help but pat him on the head, beaming. Suddenly, she noticed he looked extremely pale, and the sight of that made her heart sink. She immediately asked him in concern, "Do you normally have any discomfort?" Hearing that, the boy frowned and mulled briefly before answering with hesitance, "My heart feels uncomfortable sometimes." His words brought a frown to Roxanne's face, and she pressed on, "Can you tell me in detail?" Again, the boy pondered for some time. "Sometimes, it beats really fast, but it goes back to normal after a while. This is a typical symptom of arrhythmia." Roxanne shot Jack a look before instructing the boy, "Dear, could you lie on this bed? I'd like to examine you a little." Carrying the stuffed bunny, the little boy climbed onto the bed obediently. Then, Roxanne began taking his pulse. Meanwhile, Jack activated the machine beside them. Not long after, their suspicion was confirmed. The boy was suffering from a severe case of arrhythmia. However, he was very lucky that nothing major happened to him. Thankfully, they had discovered his illness. Before Jack could say anything, Roxanne had already brought out her acupuncture tools while comforting the boy, "This might hurt a little. Please bear with it, okay?" Although the boy did not know what she was going to do, the sight of the long needle frightened him a little. Nonetheless, the stuffed bunny in his arms gave him a strange sense of courage, and he nodded in response. Following that, Roxanne patted his head and began inserting the needles. Acupuncture could help reduce the symptoms of arrhythmia, which was something she knew long ago. Just when she was about to insert the last needle, Jack's voice rang out behind her. "This point might be better." Roxanne halted in her movements, and she cast a confused glance at the acupuncture point Jack was pointing at. He smiled. "The Damaris family has done some research on this before. The acupuncture points you've chosen are the most common points used to treat arrhythmia. But based on our research, the treatment's effects will be better if the last acupuncture point was switched to this." Surprise flashed past Roxanne's eyes. After all, the acupuncture points Jack was referring to was rarely used in acupuncture treatments. She could not guarantee what kind of effect it would bring if she actually inserted the needle there. Maybe things are as Jack said. It might actually improve the boy's condition. Then again, his condition might also worsen. At the same time, the boy watched them earnestly, though he did not understand their conversation. However, he trusted them with all their heart and did not question them. After thinking about it carefully, Roxanne looked up at Jack, whose gaze was brimming with confidence. Finally, Roxanne decided to follow Jack's suggestion and insert the last needle into the other point. Expecting someone else. After some time, Roxanne asked concernedly, "Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" The boy shook his head. He felt nothing apart from the moments the needles were inserted. Only then did Roxanne feel relieved. She waited for a little while longer before retrieving all the needles when the time was up. Seeing that, the boy sat up on the bed and asked naively, "Ms. Jarvis, am I healed?" A sharp pang hit Roxanne's heart. "No. We'll need to continue observing you in the future. Remember to pay more attention to your health and don't take part in vigorous exercises, okay?" The boy nodded. Then, Roxanne prescribed him some traditional medicine, to which Jack gave many suggestions. After a thorough contemplation, she still accepted his suggestions and made changes to the prescription. When that was completed, the boy took the paper and went looking for the staff responsible for packing the medicines. Sadness was written all over Roxanne's face as she watched him leave. Perhaps it was because the medical consultation had gone extremely well and the boy's illness was not too severe. Still, Roxanne could not help but feel bad for him. If he were an ordinary child, his parents would do everything in their power to care for him if they found out about his condition. But this child is an orphan. If not for this medical consultation, he would have. Just as she was about to be overwhelmed by sorrow, Jack's voice sounded from behind her. "Don't worry. The follow-up treatment from my family's medical consultation is free. We'll continue to observe his condition until he has recovered." Upon hearing that, Roxanne turned around and shot him a grateful look. "I'd like to thank your family on behalf of the kid." Jack let out a hearty laugh. After calming himself down, he raised his brow at the remaining gifts she placed by the wall. "What are you going to do with these?" Following his line of sight, Roxanne grabbed the bags and informed, "Please wait for me. I'll distribute these to the other children." Hence, Jack nodded and waited patiently. Immediately, Roxanne stepped out of the tent, and the children's cheers immediately sounded on the outside. Jack chuckled, for he had expected how much the children would like her. "Mr. Damaris, this is the log for today's medical consultation. Please have a look." An employee handed Jack a folder. Hence, Jack nodded and accepted the folder. He had just flipped open the first page when the sound of a phone ringing filled the tent. Glancing in the direction of the sound, he spotted Roxanne's phone flashing on the table. Earlier during the medical consultation, they had placed their phones there for convenience. However, Roxanne forgot to take it with her when she left. Flashing the employee a smile, Jack walked to the table and looked at the phone. The name on the caller ID was none other than Lucian. Jack raised his brow and turned his head to glance at the tent's entrance. The children's cheers never stopped, and Roxanne's laughter could be heard in between. Clearly, Roxanne was having a great time with the kids and would not be back so soon. At that realization, Jack retracted his gaze and picked up the phone. Lucian did not speak right away, so Jack purposely kept quiet, too. It was not after some time that Lucian's deep voice rang out. "What are you doing?" As if having just returned to his senses, Jack responded in an exaggerated tone, "Mr. Farwell? Geez, I was expecting someone else." Why didn't you say anything? What is it, anyway? Do you need something from Ms. Jarvis? Right as he finished his words, a dead silence took over the conversation. Though Jack said nothing else, the look on his face could easily make others misunderstand. For a moment, only the sound of their breaths could be heard through the phone. It was as if they were at a standstill. Neither of them spoke or hung up. Slightly uneasy, "Where's Roxanne?" Lucian's voice finally rang out again after some time. Only then did Jack let out a chuckle. He kept quiet for a moment and finally uttered, "Ms. Jarvis is busy. I can help you convey your message to her instead." A grim look instantly spread across Lucian's face. "Roxanne's with Jack again, hey? And she even let him take care of such a private device?" When he thought of the purpose of his call, the atmosphere around him grew terrifyingly tense. Caden, who was standing opposite Lucian, felt his heart sink when he saw the scowl that spread over the latter's face. Who on earth answered the phone? Who can make Mr. Farwell so furious? "That won't be necessary," Lucian snapped coldly. "Since she's busy, then I'll call her later to talk to her myself." Meanwhile, Jack arched a brow. "I'm afraid you might have misunderstood something, Mr. Farwell. I'm just working with Ms. Jarvis out here. If you don't believe me, I can get her to answer the call now." While saying that, he instructed someone beside him, "Get Dr. Jarvis." Before he could finish, Lucian interrupted in a threatening tone, "Of course, I believe you're working closely with Roxanne. However, I hope you should at least have some self-awareness. Stay away from her unless it's related to work. I don't mind personally teaching you a lesson when it is necessary." With that, he hung up without waiting for a response from Jack, who eyed the darkened phone screen in amusement. "I was just playing a little trick on him. Who would have known Mr. Farwell would actually lose his cool and threaten me? Looks like Roxanne and Mr. Farwell are much closer than I thought. Or maybe he's thinking the same about me and Roxanne." With that thought in mind, Jack cast a meaningful glance outside the tent where Roxanne's voice came from. "I wonder what Lucian means to her." Just then, the employee asked tactfully, "Mr. Damaris, should I still get Dr. Jarvis to come in?" Her voice immediately brought him back to reality. Returning Roxanne's phone to where it was, he shook his head and said, "No. It's all right. After all, he only said that to put on an act." Hearing that, the employee gave a brief response and returned to her seat. At the same time, Roxanne had finally freed herself from the children and entered the tent with all smiles. "Someone called you just now, and I answered it for you," Jack stated truthfully when he saw her coming in. Roxanne immediately froze in her tracks. "Who was it?" Feigning confusion, Jack explained, "It was Mr. Farwell, but he refused to tell me what the matter was." "Lucian?" Roxanne's heart skipped a beat. "Why is he still calling me? Isn't he already dating Aubrey? Has he finally come to his senses and wants to apologize to me?" All those speculations made her feel uneasy. In the past, Lucian had always been displeased with her interaction with Jack. Now that Jack had answered the phone on her behalf, she could not imagine what Lucian would feel. Realizing what she was thinking, Roxanne clenched her fist to snap herself out of it. "No. He'll be fine. Lucian was just using me." I'm sure he was just faking his displeasure in the past. With that, she put her thoughts away and gave Jack a firm nod. Okay. I'll take care of it. Roxanne never came to see him. Jack had been staring at her ever since she returned. Naturally, he did not miss the look of anxiousness on her face earlier. I believe it was rather rude of me to answer the call for you. I hope you don't mind. Hearing that, Roxanne grinned as if everything was fine. It's okay. Still, Jack probed, I wonder why he called you. I tried asking him, but he refused to tell me. In response, Roxanne shook her head. I don't know either. Intrigued, Jack raised his brow. Though Roxanne thought she had done a good job at concealing her emotions, he still saw through her. After all, the change in her expression was too obvious from the moment she stepped into the tent. Indeed, the phone call stirred up some emotions in her heart. Looks like Lucian has a special spot in her heart. This is interesting. Meanwhile, in the CEO's office of Farwell Group, Caden peered at Lucian fearfully. Lucian had been looking unhappy ever since he hung up. To be more specific, he had been like that ever since Jack spoke. In fact, even the temperature around him lowered. Judging from his experience in dealing with Lucian, Caden knew he should keep his mouth shut to avoid triggering the former's fury. However, that was clearly impossible. Caden uttered carefully, Mr. Farwell, how should we deal with the medicinal herbs? Lucian had been sick for the past few days. During that period, he had instructed Caden to order a batch of medicinal herbs from Herbscape Group's branch. At first, Caden did not know what Lucian wanted to do with them. It was not until Caden witnessed Lucian making a call that he understood the situation. The first thing Mr. Farwell did the moment he recovered was to help Ms. Jarvis solve her problem. At that realization, Caden could not help but feel touched on Roxanne's behalf. Alas, it was the wrong person who answered the call, and Lucian's kind intention was not made aware of. Caden could not help but pity Lucian. He originally thought Lucian would give up on the idea of giving Roxanne the medicinal herbs out of anger. To his surprise, Lucian fell silent for a moment before saying, "Send them over." Lucian's words, which were laced with anger, stunned Caden. Did I hear him right? Isn't he mad? Still, he wants to send the medicinal herbs to Ms. Jarvis? Caden hesitated, not sure if he should carry out Lucian's orders. When Lucian spotted Caden still in his office, he uttered coldly, "What are you waiting for?" Hearing that, Caden straightened his back and responded, "I'll work on it now." With that, he spun around and exited the office. In the meantime, Lucian glanced at his darkened phone screen as his gaze darkened too. Lately, Estella always returned home with an expectant look. Sometimes, she would even stay up late, claiming that Roxanne would visit and treat Lucian. Of course, Lucian knew Estella had already reported his condition to Archie and Benny. He surmised the boys would have already relayed the information to Roxanne and told her to see him. The fact that Estella was so expectant made it hard for Lucian to not feel the same. Never did he expect Roxanne to not give him a single call when he had been ill for almost a week. If he had not taken the initiative to call her that day, he would never know she was with Jack. A hint of mockery flashed past his eyes when he thought of that. To Roxanne, her job is always the most important thing. Or is it because she's working with Jack this time? Who else can it be? Meanwhile, Caden took some men with him and brought the herbs to Roxanne's research institute. Around the same time, Jack sent Roxanne back in his car. The three of them came face to face the moment they got out of their respective cars. Caden was stunned to see Roxanne and Jack coming out of the same car. Jack was the first to break the silence. "We have just finished our medical consultations. Ms. Jarvis' car broke down, so I sent her back." To Caden, his explanation was meant to hide the truth. He then turned to look at Roxanne. "Mr. Lawson, what are you doing here?" Roxanne felt a little guilty when she met Caden's gaze, but she managed to calm herself down. Caden glanced at the man standing next to her and replied loudly, "Mr. Farwell has asked me to deliver these medicinal herbs to you. Now that you are back, please do an inventory check." With that, he turned around and signaled to his staff. Very soon, the staff unloaded all the boxes of herbs. "Lucian asks him to send these medicinal herbs?" Roxanne was puzzled. She knew she had never mentioned such a request to Lucian. "Is Lucian trying to make it up to me by sending these medicinal herbs?" Roxanne could not help but find it ironic. Jack, on the other hand, raised his brows in surprise when he saw the medicinal herbs. Inadvertently, he said, "I suppose this is why Mr. Farwell called you earlier on." Only then did Roxanne return to her senses and nod hesitantly. She could not think of other reasons as well. It was annoying for Caden to see Roxanne standing next to Jack. He felt it was unfair to Lucian. "Ms. Jarvis, everything is here. Please inspect them. If you need more, do let me know," Caden added. Roxanne was not sure if she should accept Lucian's gift. "Mr. Farwell found out that your research institute has caught on fire. These herbs are difficult to acquire, and he asked me to transfer some from abroad 2 days ago. They would have arrived earlier if it wasn't because of the transportation." Caden was trying to make Lucian's presence known. A peculiar feeling arose with Roxanne. "So, these are the herbs." Shortly after the research institute caught fire, Lucian asked her if she needed any help. However, Colby claimed he would find a solution back then. That was why Roxanne turned Lucian down. In the end, Lucian still ended up procuring those herbs for her. In that instant, Roxanne could not think straight. Before that, it had always been her suspicion that Lucian was the mastermind of that fire. But, if it was really him, why does he bother to do this? Then again, if it isn't him, who can it be? "Well, I didn't expect to receive Mr. Farwell's support." Jack's voice rang out. Roxanne composed herself, but she did not know how to respond to Jack's comment. Instead, Caden remarked, "Mr. Farwell's support is only meant for Ms. Jarvis. Mr. Damaris, I hope you don't get the wrong idea." Afraid that he might have offended Jack, Caden added nonchalantly, "After all, Mr. Farwell and Ms. Jarvis are well acquainted." When Jack heard that, he looked at Roxanne with raised eyebrows. "Are Ms. Jarvis and Mr. Farwell related in any other ways? Is there something I should know?" Roxanne was taken aback by his questions, and she tensed up ever so slightly. "We do know one another. Our children are classmates." Roxanne had no wish to reminiscence her relationship with Lucian. That is all. However, Roxanne had no idea that Jack had found out about her past. That was why Jack raised his brows and looked at Caden when he heard her denial. Once again, Caden felt unjust on Lucian's behalf. Despite Lucian being ill, he still insisted on helping Roxanne. Caden could not understand why she was so ungrateful. Furthermore, she seemed so secretive about her relationship with Lucian. It was as though Lucian was an embarrassment. In spite of his thoughts, there was no way Caden could express them outright in front of Jack. These medicinal herbs are difficult to find. Mr. Farwell has transferred nearly all of the remaining medicinal herbs from Herbscape Group. Roxanne's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to calm down quickly. Please convey my thanks to Mr. Farwell. However, as far as Roxanne was concerned, Lucian did that in order to compensate for making use of her in the past. Therefore, she had no intention to accept his gift. Moreover, Jack had already provided them with sufficient medicinal herbs. Before she could finish her sentence, Jack cut in. Since this is a nice gesture from Mr. Farwell, I reckon you should kindly accept it, Ms. Jarvis. With a serious look on his face, Jack looked at Roxanne before he continued, our research is going to be more complicated in the future. There's no harm in having more medicinal herbs. Anyway, they're free. Why not? Roxanne hesitated again. Caden could not stand it any longer. Even though Lucian was ill, he still thought of her and tried to assist her. At the end of the day, she was actually planning not to accept his gift. Just as Caden was about to open his mouth, Roxanne finally nodded. Please thank Mr. Farwell for his kindness. Roxanne then nodded at Caden with gratitude. For some strange reason, Caden felt a twinge in his heart. Does Ms. Jarvis accept these medicinal herbs because she wants them? Or is she doing it because of what Jack tells her? Caden could hardly breathe when he saw that another man had to convince Roxanne to accept Lucian's kind gift. As for Roxanne, she did not spare the matter any further thought. Instead, she went forward to check the herbs before getting her staff to carry them in. If there's nothing else, I will make a move first. Grandpa is still waiting for my report on the medical consultation. Once Jack was done helping her with the inventory taking, he took his leave. Roxanne watched as his car left. Suddenly, Caden's voice rang in her ears. Ms. Jarvis. Upon hearing that, Roxanne turned around in confusion. Caden chose his words carefully even though he was feeling anxious. If you don't mind me asking, Mr. Damaris and you? He did not need to finish the rest of his sentence. Roxanne knew what he wanted to ask. We are just friends working together. Please don't get the wrong idea. Naturally, Caden did not quite believe her. Outwardly, he let out a sigh of relief and began to say nice things about Lucian. To be honest, Mr. Farwell gave the instruction to have these medicinal herbs transferred while he was still ill. The moment he feels better today, he told me to deliver these herbs over to you. Although Roxanne's heart was racing, she nodded in acknowledgement. Please thank Mr. Farwell for me. Caden was dumbstruck. That's it? Lucian regards her with utmost importance. In the end, is this all he gets? Just a word of thanks? It was as if Roxanne knew what was on his mind, so she added, the Research Institute owes Mr. Farwell a favor. Please let us know when he needs our help. We will try our best." Even though it was a promise, she only said she would try her best. Caden's heart sank, and he felt sorry for Lucian. His and her 1011. Not like that. While Jack was just about to step into the Damaris residence when he bumped into his parents. "Dad, Mom, what are you doing here?" Ever since he had proven his capabilities in taking over the family business, both Titus and Priscilla started to travel to other places to do their medical consultations. For some unknown reason, they came home without informing him. Priscilla frowned and shot a reproachful look at her son before asking, "Heard that you are involved with Lucian's ex-wife?" His parents must have seen the overwhelming discussions on the internet which took place a while ago. As a result, they did an investigation on Roxanne and found out that she had 2 children. What was more surprising to them was the fact that Roxanne was Lucian's ex-wife. The thought of her son socializing with a divorcee with children irked Priscilla. Jack looked at his mother in puzzlement. "How did you find out?" Since Jack did not deny it, then it must be true. Priscilla was displeased. "The online comments went wild a while ago. All of our relatives are asking us about it." Jack became even more confused after hearing that. "They know that Roxanne is Lucian's." Before he could finish his sentence, his mother cut him off. "We did our own investigation. Do you want others to know that you are seeing a divorcee?" Priscilla found it difficult to suppress her anger when she saw her son's reaction. "I'm the one who brought you up, and I have never interfered in your private life. You can date any woman you want to." She stared furiously at Jack before continuing, "But, why can't you find someone else? Must you date a divorcee with 2 children? On top of that, her ex-husband is that guy from the Farwell family. You'll be made a laughingstock once people find out about this." After listening to his mother's lecture, Jack showed no remorse. Instead, a grin appeared on his face. His unrepentant response annoyed Priscilla even more, and she glared at Titus Damaris. Sensing his wife's stare, Titus felt helpless. However, under the pressure of his wife, he had no choice but to say something. "Your mom is right. There are so many women out there. Why must you find someone who is in the same social circle as us?" Both the Farwell family and the Damaris family were prominent families in Horrington. How are we going to socialize with them if our son really ends up with Lucian's ex-wife? Titus thought he was stern enough in his reprimand. Unfortunately, he fell short of his wife's expectations. He turned around to find that the grin on Jack's face was even more apparent than before. Titus frowned. "Why are you smiling? This is a serious matter." It was only then Jack walked up to his parents and sat down on a single cedar couch. It was obvious that he had something to say. Priscilla exchanged glances with Titus before the two of them turned their attention to their son. Jack then started to explain slowly, "You've got the wrong idea." When his parents heard that, they looked perplexed. "The comments on the internet are going crazy. How can we be mistaken? Have those netizens gotten it wrong too? So, are those photos fake?" Priscilla could not help but question him. Jack shook his head before replying, "Of course not. But, it isn't what they think." Titus and Priscilla still eyed their son with suspicion. They had watched Jack grow up. In all those years, they had never once seen their son behaving so intimately with a woman. What exactly are you planning? At a single glance, Jack saw right through his parents. Exasperation inexorably swamped him. Since you've investigated Ms. Jarvis, I'm sure you already know that she's an exceedingly outstanding doctor. With regard to that statement, Titus and Priscilla had no rebuttal. During the investigation, they had already learned that Roxanne studied under Harvey and was even his top student. That alone was sufficient for them to acknowledge her medical attainments. However, that didn't mean they could accept the fact that she was a divorcee with kids. Jack could tell that his parents were still influenced by public opinion, so he had no choice but to continue explaining things to them helplessly. I reckon you're both aware of the project the Damaris family established recently. In response, Titus and Priscilla nodded noncommittally. Despite being away from the Damaris residence most of the time, they still kept themselves informed about the Damaris family's activities. At that, Jack nodded in satisfaction. Since you know of this project, you must know that Ms. Jarvis is also one of the members involved. Everything was fine before he mentioned that, but the instant he did so, Priscilla's face darkened once more. I heard she also obtained the opportunity by selling her body. Before she could vocalize the rest of that comment, Jack interrupted testily, that's just a baseless rumor. Hadn't Jessica apologized? When Priscilla heard that, her expression turned even grimmer. Jessica had been her ideal candidate for a daughter-in-law throughout the years, but she had never imagined that the woman would do such a thing. In consideration that it was her misjudgment, she didn't say anything further. Subsequently, Jack continued, although I'm taking the lead in this project, Grandpa was the one who chose the collaboration partners. He selected Ms. Jarvis because she showed outstanding performance in the medical consultation. He even personally discussed the collaboration with her. Surprise flashed across Titus and Priscilla's eyes when they learned that she passed Hector's selection. In other words, he's also aware of Jack's interaction with her? If so, why didn't he put a stop to it? When Jack saw that his parents were still misconstruing things, a headache assailed him. His parents had been immersed in improving their medical skills all these years. Consequently, they were seemingly dense when it came to other matters. More accurately speaking, they couldn't be bothered to give much thought to anything else. That also made it extraordinarily taxing for him to clarify things to them. While the Damaris family is a century-old prestigious family in the medical field, its strength is still lacking when it comes to certain aspects even now. As the heir of the Damaris family, dating is definitely not my priority at present, so you can both rest easy, Jack assured patiently. Speaking of the current situation of the Damaris family, Titus and Priscilla were finally willing to put their thinking caps on. Judging from his usual temperament, he indeed couldn't have possibly been so hasty to date that woman. But, if it's not love, why must he maintain such close ties with her? Larry is also a good choice for a collaboration partner. Priscilla had always been a straightforward person, so she demanded right then and there, in that case, what exactly are you planning? A meaningful smile bloomed on Jack's face. You'll naturally know when the time comes. That reply of his had both Titus and Priscilla bewildered. Alas, Jack didn't give them any opportunity to ask about it further. All right, I'm going upstairs to report the results of today's medical consultation to Grandpa. Go and rest since you've both just come back." After saying that, he got up from the couch. Before going upstairs, he didn't forget to urge, "Don't listen to all those gossips out there regarding the matter between me and Ms. Jarvis." There was nothing Titus and Priscilla could do about it, so they had no choice but to nod in acquiescence. What had happened between them? Meanwhile, at the research institute, Caden rambled incessantly about Lucian's merits while helping to transport the medicinal herbs. Regretfully, Roxanne remained unmoved. At the end of his rope, Caden took his leave after transporting the medicinal herbs and left. On his way back to Farwell Group, resentment brewed within him. Even when he went into the CEO's office to report back to Lucian, his face was as black as thunder. "What's with this expression of yours?" Glimpsing his assistant's expression, Lucian frowned, thinking that Roxanne turned down his help. Only then did Caden snap back to his senses. He chuckled guiltily. "Nothing." Seeing that he didn't want to speak of it, Lucian didn't press him for an answer, merely inquiring, "Have you sent the medicinal herbs over?" Caden suppressed the grievance within him and replied succinctly, "Yes." Ms. Jarvis received it personally. He initially thought that his employer would have questions since he mentioned Roxanne. Unexpectedly, Lucian acted as though he didn't hear it, nodding expressionlessly. "Got it. You're dismissed." "That's all?" Caden was stunned for a long while, finding it incredulous. When Lucian remained silent, he sheepishly spun on his heel to leave. While he walked out of the office, he wavered about telling the man about Roxanne and Jack riding in the same car. But upon imagining Lucian's expression after learning about it, he couldn't help shuddering. Hence, he silently nixed that idea. Even when it was time to get off work in the evening, Lucian never mentioned Roxanne anymore. It was as though that batch of medicinal herbs was meant to signify an end to their relationship. Sitting in the adjacent assistant's office, Caden watched as Lucian walked out of his office with a face devoid of expression and took the elevator directly when it was time to get off work. A mixture of emotions roiled within him. Is Mr. Farwell really giving up on Ms. Jarvis? Needless to say, Lucian knew nothing about Caden's thoughts. Nonetheless, his feelings somewhat aligned with the latter's conjectures. Ever since he fell ill until that present day, Roxanne's reaction had disappointed him beyond words. He felt that he had already sacrificed enough and lowered himself sufficiently to make up for his mistakes 6 years ago. Yet, she remained unmoved. Therefore, he felt that he needed to stop for a while and carefully assess what was lacking between them. He mulled it over throughout the drive. Soon, his car slowly came to a stop at the gates of the kindergarten. Archie, Benny, and Estella hadn't been let out of school yet. For once, he waited for them at the gates. Some time later, the children walked out in a line under Pippa's lead. They seemingly caught sight of his tall figure at once. "Daddy!" It was the first time Estella saw her father that early, so she should be thrilled. However, she appeared listless. "It's been a long time since I've seen Ms. Jarvis. I heard from Archie and Benny that they've also tried persuading her, but she refuses to meet me. I wonder what had happened between Daddy and her now." Little did she know that the subsequent events would be even worse than she had imagined. When the children had walked over to him, Lucian held his hand out to Estella. "Let's go home." Hearing that, Estella snapped her eyes up and gaped at her father in surprise. But Ms. Lane isn't here yet. In the past, they had always waited with Archie and Benny. Only when the boys had left would Estella do the same. At the side, Archie and Benny were also perplexed, not quite understanding Lucian's meaning. Previously, Daddy left with Essie right away because he was sick. But now, he has obviously recovered. Because of this evil woman. Lucian cast a look at Archie and Benny indifferently. A strange feeling inexplicably welled up within Archie and Benny when they met his gaze. The look in Daddy's eyes when he regards us seems to have changed. In fact, they felt that the man seemingly didn't want to look at them for long, his gaze only staying on them for a brief moment before leaving in the next heartbeat. Mr. Farwell. Benny couldn't help venturing. Lucian merely inclined his head a fraction. Ms. Ward will wait with you both. Having said that, he held his hand out at Estella once more. Estella was reluctant to leave, but she could tell that her father appeared to be angry. After a moment's hesitation, she ultimately reached out and took his hand. Archie and Benny, on the other hand, could only quieten down and watch helplessly as Lucian left with Estella. Is Daddy mad at Mommy, Archie? Benny stared at his brother pitifully. Archie remained expressionless, but disappointment glinted in his eyes. That was also the only possibility he could think of. After all, Lucian kept Roxanne company by her side every time she was sick. But this time, he was sick, yet she didn't even bother inquiring about his condition. Daddy must be pretty disappointed. Meanwhile, Lucian brought Estella into the car. His gaze swept over Archie and Benny at the gates of the kindergarten. Then, he slowly started the car. When they had driven out a distance away, Estella couldn't resist asking, "Are you mad at Ms. Jarvis, Daddy?" Lucian's brows creased, and he didn't answer that. He could guess what she wanted to say, but he wasn't in the mood to listen right then. Unaware of her father's thoughts, Estella continued in a cute voice, "She didn't mean to keep away instead of visiting you. It must have been because she was busy with work." She was sad about the fact that she hadn't seen Roxanne in a long time, but still, she chose to comfort him. "Ms. Jarvis is already avoiding us. If Daddy is mad at her on top of that, I don't know when they'll make up." At the end of the day, she was still yearning for Roxanne to be her mother. Lucian wasn't at all surprised to hear that. If it were in the past, he would have played along with her and consoled her. This time, however, he merely frowned. His voice was also a touch chilly. "We'll talk about this another day." Such an attitude made it clear that he was planning to evade the matter. Estella's cheeks puffed up. Despite her reluctance, she still zipped her mouth obediently. As she glowered at his back, she mused inwardly. Daddy must be mad at Ms. Jarvis, or even livid. What must I do to have them make up? She was rather troubled by the situation. Before she could figure out a solution, the car had already come to a slow stop before the Farwell residence. Lucian alighted from the car before turning back and carrying Estella out. Just when the two of them were about to head into the mansion, the door was opened from the inside, upon which Aubrey walked out. At the sight of her, Lucian's expression changed slightly. Estella was likewise shocked, and her face scrunched up. "Don't tell me," Daddy is suddenly mad at Ms. Jarvis because of this evil woman. Lucian, Essie, you're back. As though blinded to their change in expression, Aubrey went up to them with a bright smile. Behind her followed Catalina, who wore an exasperated expression. Aubrey came to visit out of the blue that afternoon, claiming that she wanted to check on Lucian's recovery. It went without saying that she had no authority to kick the woman out, so she could only allow her to stay. Without a hint of concern, Lucian merely tilted his head at Aubrey apathetically before bringing Estella into the mansion. Behind them, as Aubrey eyeballed their backs, a flash of something flittered across her eyes. From what I know, Roxanne and Lucian hadn't met ever since that night. Ha! It's evident that they knew her place and gave up. With that being the case, I've got to seize this opportunity all the more and secure my position as the future mistress of the Farwell family. Although Lucian remained indifferent to her as usual, she wasn't deterred in the least. Upon seeing that they had gone into the mansion, she hurriedly followed suit. Is something the matter? Lucian had already seen Estella back to her room and was descending the stairs. He pinned a detached look on the woman at the door. Halting in her steps, Aubrey answered smilingly, "Mrs. Farwell told me to come and see how you're doing." By then, Lucian had already retracted his gaze on her. "I've already recovered, so tell her not to worry." Aubrey wanted to speak further, but he had promptly dismissed her, adding, "If there's nothing else, you may leave." At that, Aubrey abruptly froze. "But how could I possibly leave when I haven't even got the time to do anything?" Lucian swept his gaze over her. "Wasn't it my mother who asked you to come and look in on me? You've seen me now, so it's best that you go over quickly and tell her how I'm doing so that she won't worry." After saying that, he withdrew his gaze, unwilling to lay eyes on her any longer than necessary. His insouciance had Aubrey gritting her teeth hard. "Even so, I must think of a way to draw close to him." With that in mind, she cast a glance at the stairs at the door. A second later, she retracted her gaze and flashed the man a smile. "You're right. I'll leave you to it, then. Please excuse me." In response, Lucian nodded noncommittally. Pursing her lips, Aubrey smiled before whirling around and walking toward the door. Unexpectedly, her foot slipped just as she reached the stairs. "Ah!" A shriek echoed in the mansion. Startled, Catalina hastily ran out to see what had happened. She was greeted by the sight of Aubrey sitting on the ground pathetically, curled into a ball while cradling her ankle with both hands and hissing her breaths perpetually. From the looks of it, she was in agonizing pain. "What's wrong, Miss Pearson?" Seeing that, Catalina swiftly rushed over to help her up. Alas, Aubrey kept her head lowered with her eyes trained on her ankle. Her forehead was dotted with sweat. Panicking slightly, Catalina jerked her head up and cried out for Lucian. "Mr. Farwell, quick, come and have a look." No sooner had her voice rang out than Lucian's figure appeared at the door of the mansion. He stared down at the woman on the ground. What happened? It wasn't until Aubrey heard his voice that she lifted her head with a painful expression on her face and forced a smile. "It's nothing. I just..." While saying that, she forcibly tried to get up from the ground. But the moment her injured leg touched the ground, a stab of excruciating pain shot through her body. Unstable on her feet, she almost fell back onto the ground. Catalina failed to react in time. Just when Aubrey was going to take a spill, a hand materialized all of a sudden. It was Lucian. "Don't force yourself when you're hurt." Frowning, Lucian aloofly supported her elbow with a hand and helped her regain her feet. Despite helping her, his tone remained impassive without a hint of concern. When she was steady on her feet, he dropped his hand and ordered Catalina, "Help Miss Pearson in. Even a hairline fracture is worth it." "Sorry, I was thinking about something earlier, so I accidentally missed the step," Aubrey murmured in feigned contrition after Catalina had helped her onto the couch. Standing behind the two of them, Lucian said nothing to that. Aubrey's heart sank, and she hypocritically remarked, "I probably twisted my ankle by accident. Let me rest for a while before going over to Mrs. Farwell's place to tell her about your condition." Having said that, she acted as though she was afraid that he would worry and flashed him another smile. She initially thought that her comment would garner the man's sympathy. At the very least, he would allow her to stay over that night. To her disappointment, Lucian merely bobbed his head blithely. Subsequently, he crouched before her. For a moment, she was at a loss. A heartbeat later, a sharp pain came from her ankle, upon which her expression instantly changed. "Does it hurt?" Lucian queried in a deep voice, a hand grasping her injured ankle. Gritting her teeth, Aubrey nodded fervently. In the next instant, Lucian dropped his hand off her. "It's likely a fracture." When Aubrey heard that, her eyes lit up, and she ventured, "Is it that serious?" Then, "Can I?" Before she could finish her utterance with her request to stay the night at the manor, Lucian cut her off. "Have Dr. Elswick make a trip here and check her over," Lucian instructed Catalina, shifting his gaze away from her. Humming in acknowledgement, Catalina immediately contacted the family doctor. Aubrey wanted to make another try, but Lucian's voice sounded once more. "If it's severe, you might have to go to the hospital. Stay still and sit here to wait for Dr. Elswick to come and check on your injury." On the whole, those words could be considered an expression of concern. However, Aubrey knew all too well that he was merely fulfilling his obligations as the host. Otherwise, his tone wouldn't be so icy. "If I hadn't taken a tumble at his doorstep, he probably wouldn't even have bothered to inquire about my condition." At that realization, she couldn't help recalling how the man kept Roxanne company for the entire night when the latter fell sick. With the comparison between the two, a tidal wave of resentment surged within her. The expression on her face grew considerably grimmer. Lucian, on the other hand, had already sat down on the couch next to her. Right then, he was checking his emails on his phone. It was abundantly clear that he planned on having the family doctor deal with her injury. His impassioned look had the envy within Aubrey blazing all the hotter. Yet, she was also aware that it wasn't a good time for her to speak. Almost half an hour passed before Sunny finally arrived. "What's the matter, Catalina? Who did you say was injured on the phone just now?" Hastening over, Catalina pointed at Aubrey on the couch. "Miss Pearson tripped and fell at the stairs. Go and check on her, quick." Sunny had been the family doctor of the Farwell family for many years, so he was naturally acquainted with Aubrey. Hearing that she was injured, he quickly stepped forward with his medical kit to check her over. Soon, Aubrey's painful groans filled the air. Withdrawing his hand, Sunny concluded solemnly, "I'm afraid it's a hairline fracture. I can't treat this." At that diagnosis, a glimmer of surprise flittered across Aubrey's eyes. "Oh no, a hairline fracture. I merely wanted to put on a show to stay the night at the Farwell residence. Never had I thought that I'd sustain such a severe injury. But on second thought, I've already fractured my arm previously. As long as I obtain the results I want, even a fracture is worth it." At that thought, she lifted her eyes and looked at Lucian with hope. "It might be best that I remain immobile, considering my injury. Can I intrude on you for tonight and stay here at the manor?" Petty tricks. In the meantime, Estella was getting hungry from waiting, so she let herself out the door. As soon as she arrived downstairs, she heard Aubrey express her intention to spend the night. Alarm bells sounded in Estella's head. She waddled over to her father's side. Daddy and Ms. Jarvis had not reconciled, and she would be even angrier if she finds out that Ms. Pearson is going to spend the night here. Even worse, Estella feared her father would have Aubrey become her mother. The child gazed at her father with wide, unblinking eyes and conveyed her thoughts without uttering a word. Lucian met Estella's eyes and caressed her head comfortingly, then turned his gaze to Aubrey. Aubrey's heart thumped audibly at the realization that Lucian's answer was not what she wanted to hear. "You should go to a hospital for that. I wouldn't be able to explain myself to my mother if your condition worsens." Lucian's tone was cold. After he spoke, the man stood up from the couch. Estella immediately grabbed her father's trouser leg and followed him closely behind. Oozing after the departing father and daughter, Aubrey glared maliciously at the little figure beside Lucian. "That again?" A moment later, Aubrey redirected her gaze at Lucian. "Could you come with me to the hospital then, Lucian? I'm a little scared." Lucian glanced sideways at her with a jeer, but upon considering it, nodded mutely. As she had fallen in his house, it was only polite that Lucian sent her to get treatment. "Daddy!" Estella tugged on her father's trouser leg, looking all reluctant. "Daddy accompanied Ms. Jarvis all night at the hospital when he sent her that time. I'm afraid Daddy would do the same for Ms. Jarvis." Lucian gazed down at his daughter next to him before inclining his head at Aubrey. "Wait a moment." Then, he took Estella up the stairs. "Don't go to the hospital with her, Daddy," Estella said while puffing up her cheeks as soon as they arrived upstairs. Though he knew what she was hinting at, Lucian was still amused. "Why not?" Estella leaned closer to her father with the most forlorn look she could muster, and her tone became meeker. "I know you're still mad at Ms. Jarvis, Daddy, but you'd promise me that you would ask for my blessing if you were to find me a mother." Stella sounded very hurt. Lucian frowned in puzzlement at those words. Initially, he assumed that the child would mention Roxanne again, but he was surprised when she gave a different reason instead. "I have to admit that her reason couldn't have come at a better time." Lucian placed his hand firmly atop Estella's head and caressed her soft hair. "I'm only sending Ms. Pearson to the hospital," he said gently. "I'll be back very soon." Estella gazed wide-eyed at her father, still looking skeptical. However, Lucian did not explain further. A moment later, the child relented. "Then you'd better hurry back, Daddy," she chirped. "Otherwise, I'll be scared tonight." Lucian's brows furrowed imperceptibly at those words. I wonder if that woman had taught Essie how to employ such petty tricks. "She will not mind Daddy," Estella urged a moment later when she did not receive an answer from her father. Shaking himself out of his reverie, Lucian nodded resignedly at his daughter. Only then did she let go and watch him go down the stairs. Aubrey was beside herself with anxiousness as she waited downstairs and remained in doubt as she watched Lucian descend the stairs. That little private word with Lucian is obviously trying to get him not to send me to the hospital. Aubrey was aware that Lucian spoiled Estella and was even delaying marrying her because of the girl. I wonder if I would have to go to the hospital alone because of her. Aubrey could not quell her racing heart, even when Lucian stood firmly before her. Lucian turned to address the family doctor. "I must trouble you with Ms. Pearson, Dr. Ellswick." Aubrey's eyes widened at those words when she realized she was correct in her hunch that he did not intend to keep her company. "Do you hate me that much, Lucian?" Aubrey hung her head with feigned injured and summoned her tears. Lucian grimaced impatiently. "I've contacted your parents, and they will pick you up from the hospital soon. I'll keep you company here while we wait." Aubrey glanced up with a frown. "It's late. I don't want them to worry." Lucian had already turned and marched toward the entrance. "They should be on their way and would be even more worried if they did not see you at the hospital." Gritting her teeth angrily at those words, Aubrey stood up with the doctor's help. "Be careful, Ms. Pearson." "Take your time," Sunny said in concern. Aubrey did not even glance at him. Every step she took was increasingly more forceful as if trying to fracture her ankle. Sunny watched her and was rather worried, but upon realizing that she would not heed his advice, he promptly fell silent. There was another bout of rejection when it was time to enter the car. In order to prevent any unforeseen circumstances, Sunny was to accompany Aubrey to the hospital. With respect to hierarchy, he was supposed to occupy the front passenger seat while Aubrey and Lucian sat behind. Nevertheless, when he arrived at the car, Lucian was already seated in the front passenger seat. Sunny carefully helped Aubrey into the back seat before gazing at Lucian. "What is this?" "Mr. Farwell, this is." Lucian returned his gaze through the rear-view mirror. "Sit down. Ms. Pearson wouldn't mind." Sunny then turned his gaze gingerly toward Aubrey, who refrained from gritting her teeth in consternation to smile nonchalantly at Sunny. "Please sit. I need you to help me out." Sunny was flattered by those words. "That's my job." At last, he climbed nimbly into the car and seated himself beside Aubrey. To avoid annoying Aubrey, he surreptitiously leaned toward the door to place as much distance as possible between them. Fortunately, the journey was smooth, and the car stopped outside the entrance of the hospital soon after. Lucian was the first one to exit the vehicle. Sunny followed closely behind, then turned around and helped Aubrey. Gina and her husband had been waiting for a long time by then and hurriedly came to greet them when they saw Lucian. "What happened, Lucian? How did Aubrey hurt herself?" Then, she glanced around and added anxiously, "Where's Aubrey?" As soon as she spoke, she saw her daughter appear with Sunny's help. "Other obligations?" The couple scowled. Though they knew of Lucian's intention to cancel the wedding, they did not expect him to be that harsh to their daughter. Lucian had already explained over the phone that Aubrey might have a hairline fracture, and despite knowing the severity of her condition, he did not even bother to help her. If somebody had taken a photograph and circulated it, their engagement would have become a joke. The couple's minds raced with the best course of action before resigning to humble themselves. What happened, Aubrey? How did you hurt yourself so badly? Not seeming to notice Lucian's cold attitude, the couple directed their concerned attention to their daughter and took over Sunny's job in assisting her. Aubrey allowed her emotions to run rampant at the sight of her parents. She scowled, refusing to answer them. Sunny stepped forward to speak out. Miss Pearson had fallen down the stairs, and her ankle is hurt. It's not serious and she is going to be fine with a couple of days in a cast and rest. Gina turned pale at those words. How could you say that a fracture is not serious? Aubrey gave her mother a meaningful gaze at the latter's hostile tone. Upon realizing she had said something wrong, Gina suppressed her anger. The full extent of Aubrey's injury was ascertained after paying a visit to the orthopedic specialist and taking an X-ray. The group watched as Aubrey's foot was put in a cast. Lucian glanced at the time and frowned. Now that you're here, Mr. and Mrs. Pearson, I should get going. At that, he inclined his head at the two elders before turning to Sunny. You will be responsible for following up on Ms. Pearson's progress. Expedite her recovery. Naturally, Sunny promised without hesitation. Lucian. Gina called to stop him as she glanced at her daughter and then at Lucian's departing back. Lucian's stride faltered as he turned around. Is there anything else? Gina gave a dry laugh. Look at how badly injured Aubrey is. Besides, her father and I have been busy of late and may not be able to handle her. Why don't Aubrey stay with you? Before she finished her sentence, Lucian interrupted, I will send somebody to care for her if need be. Gina gulped and turned to face her husband with a furious expression. Samuel knew what his wife was up to and chimed in at once. That's not what we meant. Besides, we won't feel at ease having an outsider care for her. Their words could not be more explicit. They hoped Aubrey would be allowed to stay at the Farwell residence. As Lucian was still courteous enough to give them due respect as elders, Samuel was reasonably confident that Lucian might agree his request. To his surprise, Lucian rejected him casually. In that case, I can send her to my mother's. In an instant, the Pearson family of three was dumbstruck. However, Lucian had still shown respect to the two elders by providing a reason. I've been swamped of late. Besides, I need to care for Essie. I have my own obligations to attend to. Upon realizing that their plan had fallen apart, Gina and her husband gritted their teeth and swallowed the indignity. Gina simpered, there's no need to trouble Mrs. Farwell. I'll take care of Aubrey at home these coming days. Lucian nodded non-committally. He turned and left after nodding once more at the two of them. A grievance. Lucian's phone rang when he arrived at the hospital entrance. It was the landline from home. When are you coming back, Daddy? Estella's demure voice sounded from the other end as soon as he picked up. I'm on the way, Lucian replied softly. Go to sleep first, I'll be home to see you soon. Estella promised and hung up quickly after that. It was already late at night when Lucian arrived back at his manor. Then, he made his way to Estella's bedroom as soon as he got home, just like how he had promised her. To his surprise, he found the child still awake. She watched him enter indignantly without saying a word. Lucian frowned. "What are you angry about this time? You're back so late," Estella complained. "I would love it if Daddy spent all night with Ms. Jarvis, but he was with Ms. Pearson. I dislike her. Counting in the travel time, it would not take him more than an hour to make it back." Lucian's brows twitched at the child's complaint. "The child had never complained when I was out all night caring for Roxanne." It was obvious that both women were given very different treatment. "I ran into Mr. Pearson and Ms. Walker," he explained patiently to the child while suppressing his exasperation. Estella's cheeks remained puffed with displeasure. Lucian knew the child would not be deterred from speaking with him about Roxanne, so he did not bother explaining further. Estella was still considering how to talk to her father, but his reply never came. However, she was not going to give up that easily after spending all night mulling over it. Then, Estella steeled herself to begin, "I don't want Miss Pearson to be my mommy." Lucian agreed with an indifferent expression. "I know. I want Ms. Jarvis," she added quickly, staring at her father. Estella's reaction did not surprise Lucian. His brows furrowed, and his gaze at his daughter turned grave. "Don't be mad at Ms. Jarvis, please, Daddy," Estella begged forlornly. Lucian fell silent for a long time before standing up from the bed. "Daddy." The child reached out to grab his shirt when she thought her father was going to leave. Lucian merely stood on the spot. His gaze fell onto her little hand. Though Estella knew her father had always accommodated her, it seemed to her that he had become really angry this time. Aware of that thought, Estella let go of her grip with an aggrieved expression on her face. "You promised me, Daddy." What's more, he was the one who suggested it. Now Daddy is going back on his word. Lucian's gaze softened at the sight of the child being close to tears. Several seconds later, he leaned over and caressed her head comfortingly. Pursing her lips, Estella avoided his gesture. Helplessness flashed across Lucian's eyes. There are no guarantees when it comes to relationships. I need to think through this. Well, just think about that woman's attitude toward me. Without giving the child the opportunity to speak, Lucian leaned over, tucked her in, and turned to leave. Pain. That very night, Gina and her husband brought Aubrey back to the Pearson residence. "You got hurt? Just stay at home for the time being," Gina said to her daughter as she sat on the edge of the bed. There was a strange expression on her face. Aubrey glanced at Gina as fury rose in her heart. "My plan backfired, so you don't want me to head out and get mocked by others, do you?" All these years, her parents had been regarding her as an item. They wanted nothing more than to marry her to Lucian. Despite sharing their sentiments, Aubrey was disappointed to be raised by such parents. Besides, they didn't offer her any help at all. Gina stiffened for a few moments before regaining her composure. "How could you say that? I'm worried about you. Look, your leg is hurt. There's no way you can go out like this." Aubrey gritted her teeth and balled her fists. She refused to admit defeat. Why did Lucian spend the entire night with Roxanne despite her minor cold but refuse to spend time with me when I am injured? The more Aubrey thought about it, the more furious she got. Gina was about to say something when Aubrey announced angrily, "No. This has to get out." Gina looked at Aubrey in confusion. Why? Aubrey had fallen down when she went to visit Lucian and had been turned away at the door. Besides, the two had been engaged for 6 years and had yet to set a wedding date. If the public were aware of these facts, they would likely draw their own conclusions and mock the Pearsons for trying to benefit from their association with the Farwells but failing to do so. Gina wanted to avoid this embarrassment for Aubrey and the Pearson family. Remembering the rumors circulating online, she felt a twinge in her heart. However, Aubrey appeared both determined and mad. "If I don't tell Sonia about this, she'll never know I was hurt." She finally realized that Lucian would never fall in love with her. Her only hope was to gain Sonia's sympathy and marry into the Farwell family with her blessings. The only way to do that was to spread the news about her injuries so that Sonia would know how Lucian treated her. It was only then that Gina realized what Aubrey was getting at. However, she still had her doubts. She knew they would have to come up with a new explanation before spreading the news. Even so, after word got out, there would be a risk that someone might uncover the truth. She was worried that their secret might be discovered. "Lucian isn't speaking with that right now. If I miss the opportunity..." Aubrey's expression turned icy. "Okay. I promise Mrs. Farwell will be informed about your injury by tomorrow morning," Gina said. Aubrey gave a satisfied nod in response. Gina showered her care and concern on Aubrey briefly before leaving her room. Aubrey was the only one left in the room. The moment the door closed, a deranged expression took over Aubrey's face. Her injured ankle was in a cast, but it still caused her pain. The pain was a reminder of how Lucian had treated her in the past few days. She had loved him for years, yet that was what she got in the end. She refused to accept her fate. She had wasted her youth on him and didn't want to let it go to waste. Even though Lucian would never love her, she still wanted to be his wife and the lady of the Farwell family. "Treated you poorly." The next morning, words about Aubrey's injury became public knowledge. Sonia contacted Aubrey to show her concern. "Aubrey, I heard you were injured. Is that true?" Aubrey sat on the edge of her bed and stared at her wounded ankle. Her expression was cold, but she replied nicely, "I accidentally fell down, but I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me, Mrs. Farwell." Sonia furrowed her brows. "How did you fall? Didn't you visit Lucian yesterday? Does he know that you're hurt?" Aubrey sounded conflicted as she responded, "Mrs. Farwell, you should stay out of this." "He knows about it, doesn't he?" Sonia immediately guessed. "Every time Lucian mentioned his relationship with Aubrey, he would tell me to stay out of it. Even Aubrey is saying the same thing now." At that thought, Sonia grew breathless with anger. "Tell me how you got hurt." A smug look flashed across Aubrey's eyes as Sonia was close to the truth. She pretended to be hesitant for a few seconds as if struggling with what to say. "Yesterday, I fell down the stairs as I was leaving Lucian's place and injured my ankle bone." Then, as if she was concerned that Sonia might hold Lucian responsible for her injury, she quickly added, "Fortunately, Lucian had Dr. Elswick treat my injury in time." Gina happened to enter her room at that exact moment, so Aubrey quickly signaled to her. Gina got her hint and immediately chimed in, Samuel and I freaked out when we received Lucian's call last night. Sonia sensed something amiss and her frown deepened. Lucian called you? Where is Aubrey now? She had assumed that Lucian would let Aubrey stay at the manor and look after her since she got injured at his place. After all, it was the right thing to do. However, she started doubting herself after hearing Gina's words. Before Gina could respond, Aubrey interjected, Mrs. Farwell, I'm at home now. I think it would be better for me to recuperate here under my parents' care. She was indicating that she chose not to recuperate at the Farwell residence. Gina quickly threw her a look. However, Aubrey wasn't about to change her mind. She seemed confident as she waited for Sonia's answer. As she anticipated, Sonia's angry voice rang out. You don't have to take his side. Lucian must have treated you poorly. I can't believe he made you leave when you were injured. Don't worry. I'll give him a piece of my mind on your behalf. Gina belatedly realized that it was merely a strategic but efficient retreat on Aubrey's part. Aubrey flashed a pleased smirk and deliberately replied, Mrs. Farwell, you've gotten it wrong. It was my decision to stop trying to defend him. I know you're a good person. Don't worry. As long as I am here, I will never let you suffer. With that, Sonia hung up right away. After the call ended, Aubrey let out a snicker and tossed her phone aside, then turned to stare at her ankle which was in a cast. She thought it was worth getting injured because Sonia was going to defend her. Gina, who was standing at the side, relaxed immediately as their plan had succeeded. Suddenly recalling why she had come upstairs, she said, Aubrey, Frida is here to visit you. Why are you here? Aubrey gathered her thoughts and nodded. Tell her to come upstairs. Okay. Gina went downstairs to tell Frida to head to Aubrey's room. Frida had learned about Aubrey's injury early this morning. She quickly made her way to the Pearson residence, as there was still something weighing on her mind. Upon receiving Gina's approval, she hastily ran upstairs. Slow down. Why are you in a hurry? My injury isn't that serious. Aubrey feigned concern, as she could hear Frida running along the corridor outside her room. The footsteps in the hallway suddenly came to a halt. Frida stood outside the bedroom door. She looked down at her phone, then at the door, and hesitated for what felt like an eternity. When Aubrey came to the door hopping on one foot, she finally snapped out of her reverie. Why are you standing outside? Aubrey sounded displeased. Had the earlier phone call with Sonia not been successful, Aubrey would not have taken the time to open the door. Frida forced a smile, padded into the bedroom behind Aubrey, and closed the door carefully. After confirming the door was shut, Frida hurried into the bedroom and sat down beside Aubrey's bed. Aubrey arched a brow and glanced at Frida. So? Why are you here? She asked as she scrolled through her phone. Frida parted her lips to speak but changed her mind and kept her thoughts unspoken. She hesitated for some time and eventually looked down at Aubrey's wounded ankle. Aubrey, is your injury serious? A trace of impatience appeared in Aubrey's eyes but quickly faded away. She replied, getting injured doesn't matter as long as I get what I want. Frida naturally knew there was a reason behind her injury. However, she did not expect to hear Aubrey say those words. Recalling how Aubrey had injured her arm the last time, Frida couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Aubrey is going all out just to get Lucian's attention, hey? With that thought in mind, she blurted out, Aubrey, you're so harsh on yourself. Aubrey's expression turned dark, for she thought Frida was mocking her. You don't understand. You have to take risks if you want to reap the rewards. Her sacrifice would be worth it as long as she achieved her goal. Frida belatedly realized she had said the wrong thing. That's not what I meant. I'm just worried about you. Aubrey put on a friendly smile despite feeling irritated inside. We're good friends, so I understand what you're saying. What I mean to say is that in order to achieve success, sacrifices must be made. Frida recalled what she had seen yesterday and bobbed her head in agreement. Aubrey gave a satisfied nod, as Frida was no longer gazing at her wound. Frida stayed in her seat next to the bed but didn't say a word for a long time. Something seemed to be weighing on her mind. Noticing that, Aubrey frowned in confusion. Why? Is there something else that brings you here? That snapped Frida out of her daze. She quickly glanced at her phone that she had put aside. Seeing that, Aubrey, too, glanced in the direction of the phone. A while later, Frida started hesitantly, I received something yesterday and was instructed to give it to you. Inexplicably, Aubrey's heart sank when she heard that. For do not turn against me, what is it? Aubrey asked with a scowl. Frida retrieved her phone and showed her a few photos. There was a tent in the first photo. Not far away from the tent was a white skirt. Nothing else was shown, but Aubrey's face was already grim. I know the tent. It was the one Roxanne and the little bastards set up that day. The white skirt is most probably the one I wore that day. The photo didn't show anything else, so the person who took the photo was obviously targeting her. In the following photo, Aubrey could be seen wearing that white skirt. She was holding a white medicine bottle with an unknown substance inside. The photos showed what Aubrey had done that day. Finally, the series of photos ended when Aubrey finished positioning the bacterium and made her exit. Aubrey's face was as dark as thunder by the time she scrolled to the last picture. Where did you get these? She demanded. Frida quickly explained, I don't know. Someone sent them to me yesterday with a text. She hurriedly scrolled to the text to show it to Aubrey. The text read, I know you're good friends with Aubrey Pearson. Show these photos to Ms. Pearson and tell her I'll delete these photos if she pays me 10 million. Otherwise, Mr. Farwell will receive them soon. For the past few days, Corey dared not contact Aubrey, as Lucian's men had been keeping an eye on him. However, he refused to give up on the chance to get some money. After racking his brains, Corey decided to find an opportunity to send a text to Frida, who was good friends with Aubrey. That was the only way to make sure Aubrey would see the evidence instead of Lucian. Aubrey, you should know who sent the text, right? Frida asked carefully. Aubrey gritted her teeth. Corey's a throne. I've put in a lot of hard work to hire the most renowned private investigator out there, only to find out he's exploiting his clients through extortion. I should have been more vigilant and not let my guard down. Seeing that she was heaving with rage, Frida guessed that she knew the person who sent the text. Have you upset someone who then followed you? If not, how did they manage to take these pictures? Aubrey suppressed her anger and replied icily, this is the private investigator I sent to follow Roxanne. Frida has seen these photos, so we're now in the same boat. I don't mind telling her my plan." Frida stiffened but quickly realized that Aubrey had fallen for someone else's trap. "I can't believe someone managed to trap her. But what was the stuff you put into the cup?" Frida asked curiously. Aubrey proceeded to explain her plan. She concluded, "I taught the little bastards a lesson before that, but they didn't learn from their mistake. So I decided to let them suffer once again." She taught them a lesson before that? Something occurred to her. "The bacterium you asked me for back then." Before she could complete her sentence, Aubrey interjected, "You guessed it right. We are both in this together, so don't you dare turn against me. I will reward you." Frida froze when she heard that. Although she hated Roxanne and her kids, she never intended to hurt Estella. After all, doing so would mean making an enemy of Lucian, and nobody in Horrington would dare to get on his bad side. However, Aubrey had gotten her involved in her evil deeds without her knowledge. "What's the matter? Are you scared?" Aubrey asked while looking at her coldly. Frida came back to her senses. Aubrey is right. Regardless of how I feel about the situation, I am indeed in the same boat as her now. Since there's no running away for me anymore, my best bet is to help Aubrey become Lucian's wife. Once she rises to power, we'll be able to cover our tracks. With that in mind, Frida flashed Aubrey a nonchalant smile and replied, "Since when have I ever been scared? Those little ES had it coming. They only have their insolence to blame." Aubrey simply stared at Frida in silence. The tension was so high that it took Frida every ounce of willpower she had just to maintain her smile. After what seemed like forever, Aubrey nodded and said, "That's more like it." Frida then mentioned the text message from Corey. "What should we do about the 10 million? Do we really give it to him?" Aubrey's expression gradually grew cold as she gave it some thought. While waiting for her response, Frida continued, "He had the audacity to threaten you, so we can't just let this slide. I'm surprised he dared demand 10 million from us. What do you plan on doing about it?" Aubrey asked with a chuckle. "We mustn't pay him the money. Doing so might just provide him with more dirt on us," Frida replied. Aubrey's face clouded over. What Frida said is indeed possible. Corey has set me up once, so he might try to do it again. However, I can't afford to take that risk. "We'll pay him the money," Aubrey muttered through clenched teeth. Frida went wide-eyed with shock. "Aubrey! If we don't, these pictures will reach Lucian tomorrow," Aubrey said with a gloomy look in her eyes. Frida shuddered when she realized what could happen. "All right, then. But what if he betrays us? Private investigators only work for the money, so they are very easily swayed." Aubrey's expression was icy cold as she replied, "After we pay him the money, we'll have someone track him down and destroy the evidence." As Frida didn't have a better idea, she could only follow Aubrey's instructions and do as she was told. "Understood. I'll have someone take care of it right away." Although Aubrey found it disgusting, she pretended to be touched and held Frida's hand. Confused, Frida froze and stared at her in silence. With Frida's hand in her own, Aubrey put on the most sincere expression possible as she said, "Don't worry, Frida. Once I marry into the Farwell family, I'll be sure to reward you for helping me all this while." Frida's panic and fear seemed to have disappeared after she heard that. She flashed Aubrey a confident smile and said, "You're doing all of this for Lucian's sake, so I'm sure he'll come to like you in the end." Those words hurt Aubrey's heart like salt on a wound. Despite feeling incredibly disgusted and annoyed, Aubrey simply let out a wry chuckle. "Let's hope so." The two of them then chatted for a little while longer. In order to prevent Corey from betraying them out of desperation, Frida quickly left to carry out Aubrey's instructions. "What she feels about you." Meanwhile, in the CEO's office of Farwell Group, Jonathan was sitting in front of Lucian with a teasing smile on his face. "I hear a portion of medicinal herbs from Herbscape Group's overseas branch has been shipped back to Horrington." Lucian simply nodded without saying anything in response. "Back then, I suggested you lend a helping hand, but you refused to do so. Now, look what has happened." Jonathan continued with a chuckle. "I thought he was actually going to ignore Roxanne completely, but he ended up intervening anyway." "Well? How did Dr. Jarvis respond to you lending her a hand?" Jonathan asked. The look on Lucian's face turned gloomy the moment he heard that. When Jonathan didn't get a response from Lucian, he slowly came to realize that he had said something he shouldn't have. From his expression, it's obvious that their relationship has yet to improve. In fact, it might even have gotten worse. This doesn't make any sense, though. Noticing the confused frown on Jonathan's face, Lucian said, "It's been a week since we've contacted each other." Jonathan got even more confused. "What? Why is that? What happened?" After taking a moment to eye Lucian from head to toe, Jonathan figured he either got mad at Roxanne or had done something to anger her again. After all, it was Lucian who wanted to win her heart over. One glance at Jonathan was all Lucian needed to figure out what he was thinking. Seeing as his line of thought was similar to Estella's, Lucian could only let out a helpless sigh. "I don't know the reason either." He then paused to take a deep breath before continuing, "I thought I had done plenty for her, but she started avoiding me again after my mother brought Essie home. She knew I was sick last week, but she didn't even bother to ask me how I was doing." That puzzled Jonathan even further. Right as he thought things couldn't get any worse, Lucian added, "I did exactly what you told me to. I sent them the medicinal herbs that they needed, but she didn't even contact me after that. She didn't even call to say thanks." Jonathan asked in shock. Lucian's lips curled into a wry smile. Not only did Roxanne not thank him for his help, but she also had someone else answer his calls for her. This doesn't make sense. You've done so much for Dr. Jarvis. She should at least feel touched or something, Jonathan mumbled to himself. How could Dr. Jarvis not feel anything at all? What else can I do? Lucian asked coldly. Jonathan felt anxious and guilty when he heard Lucian's tone of voice. Lucian has been consulting me for advice on courting Roxanne all this while, so I'm partially responsible for his failure. Dr. Jarvis is the most suitable woman for him, so I can't let her leave him like this. Even so, judging by what Lucian said earlier, it would seem that she no longer has feelings for him. Otherwise, she would have at least called to check on Lucian when he fell sick." Jonathan looked up at Lucian and asked cautiously, "Lucian, what do you think Ms. Jarvis feels about you all this while? She has given up on you." The look on Lucian's face grew solemn the moment he heard that. "How does Roxanne feel about me? I've never thought about that before. According to her, she has always treated me like a complete stranger. However, I can tell from her attitude toward me that she sees me as more than a stranger. Could it be that she has started to develop feelings for me after my attempts at wooing her?" Lucian let out a wry chuckle at the irony of that thought. "I had assumed Roxanne would feel touched by my efforts, but her response suggested otherwise. In fact, she has been acting as though my actions are causing her a lot of trouble. She probably wished I would just leave her alone, hey?" Jonathan's heart sank as well when he saw Lucian's expression grow increasingly cold. After a few minutes of awkward silence, he said, "It's possible that Dr. Jarvis has completely given up on you." Even after racking his brain, Jonathan could not see any issues with his methods. He figured the problem must have been with Roxanne's feelings instead. Jonathan could clearly feel the tension rising in the office, but he decided to continue with his analysis anyway. "If I were to put myself in her shoes, I wouldn't be able to forgive you for what happened 6 years ago either. Dr. Jarvis had been living overseas for the past 6 years, so why did she return all of a sudden? I believe it's because she has let go of what happened in the past." Now that Jonathan has mentioned it, Roxanne did claim that we're just strangers when she first returned to the country. As though Lucian's icy cold aura had affected the air around him, Jonathan felt a shiver down his spine when he was done explaining his thoughts. He quickly corrected himself by saying, "This isn't necessarily a bad thing, though. If Dr. Jarvis has completely given up on you, then the process to win her back will be a lot simpler." It wasn't until Jonathan met Lucian's icy cold gaze that he realized he had said something he shouldn't have again. "What am I saying? There's no way it's going to be simpler. Given Lucian's situation, it's obvious that the difficulty level is through the roof. Honestly, if I weren't part of the reason he ended up like this, I probably would have taken off long ago. Whatever, I've given him far too much advice to back out now. I can't just sit idly by and watch Lucian fail like this." Jonathan cleared his throat and said, "It's also possible that my suggestions weren't good enough." Lucian simply arched an eyebrow at him in response. Feeling relieved that he was finally making positive progress, Jonathan continued, "Every woman behaves differently. What other women like may not necessarily appeal to Dr. Jarvis. The most important thing right now is to focus on what she likes." Lucian remained silent and motioned for him to keep going. "In order to win Dr. Jarvis over, we'll need to do more research and find out what she truly wants," Jonathan went on. Lucian let out a sarcastic snicker, and Jonathan went silent immediately after that. "Forget it," Lucian said emotionlessly. "I've spent way too much time and effort on Roxanne. I thought I was doing a great job by supporting her interest in medicine. I even helped secure her partnership with Damaris Group and delivered the medicinal herbs that the research institute needed. I did so much for her, yet she didn't even bother to say thanks. All things considered, Jonathan is likely right about her giving up on me completely." Adding fuel to the fire. Jonathan had wanted to try persuading him further, but Lucian cut him off. "I have a meeting to attend. We'll talk about this some other time." Jonathan had no choice but to get up and leave the office. After stepping out of Farewell Group, Jonathan thought about the advice he had given Lucian earlier and regretted every single word he said. If I had known things were that bad between them, I would have changed the way I worded my sentences. Now, look what I've done. Not only did Roxanne show no interest in Lucian whatsoever, but he has also given up on winning her over. Honestly, I feel really bad for Essie. She really likes Roxanne and wants her to become her mother someday. The best part about this is the fact that Roxanne is her biological mother. However, she's in for a huge disappointment, as Lucian has already given up on winning her over. There's only so much a child like Essie can handle. Of course, Lucian had thought about the exact same thing. He showed up outside the kindergarten later that afternoon. Pippa quickly brought Estella to the front gate after receiving his call. Mr. Farewell? Why, she was going to ask Lucian why he wanted to bring Estella home all of a sudden, but held her tongue when she saw his gloomy expression. I mean, I've already approved Essie's leave. Lucian nodded and motioned for Estella to come with him. Estella was somewhat reluctant to leave. Do we have to go home right now, Daddy? Could I at least wait till school is over? She wanted to at least say goodbye to Archie and Benny before going home. Lucian nodded expressionlessly. Come here. Estella had no choice but to do as told and stepped out of the school. Ms. Ward, could you please tell Archie and Benny that I'm going home now? Okay. Pippa replied with a smile. The look in Lucian's eyes grew cold when he saw how close Estella was to Archie and Benny. After walking hand in hand with Lucian for a bit, Estella glanced at him in confusion and asked, "Why are we going home so suddenly, Daddy? Did something happen?" Lucian paused in his tracks and met her eyes. "I'm planning on transferring you to another kindergarten." Estella froze in shock. What? I'm transferring to another kindergarten? Does that mean I won't get to play with Archie and Benny anymore? No. I don't want to transfer to another kindergarten. Estella protested. She didn't even want to go to kindergarten at first, but having Archie and Benny around made it a fun place for her. She would rather quit than transfer to another one. Then you can attend kindergarten at home instead. I'll hire the best teachers for you. Lucian replied and began leading her toward the head of kindergarten's office. No. I don't want to. Estella grabbed the hem of Lucian's shirt and refused to transfer no matter what. If I transfer to another kindergarten, I won't be able to see Ms. Jarvis, Archie, and Benny again. Why do I have to transfer to another kindergarten, Daddy? You're the one who fought with Ms. Jarvis, not me. I don't even see Ms. Jarvis at school. She sobbed, adding fuel to the fire. Lucian's face darkened. I'm not transferring to another kindergarten. Estella repeated with tears in her eyes. Eventually, Lucian gave in and gave her a reassuring pat on the head. We'll talk about this at home, he said as he carried Estella into his car. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.